to A Voice and Beyond. I'm beyond thrilled to introduce you to our guest today, Suzanne Smith. And we are going to do a deep dive on a couple of topics that I'm very, very excited about. So welcome to the show, Suzanne. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much. We've been looking forward to this for months. I'm so glad we could get on each other's schedules. This is going to be a fun conversation.
I know both busy ladies. See, you want something done, you ask a busy person. We finally got here.
Exactly.
Yes, you are a nationally recognized community strategist, professor, TEDx speaker, and founder of Social Impact Architects. You're a Master Duke MBA, and you've spent more than 2 decades helping leaders tackle really complex issues in education, poverty, healthcare, and workforce development. Now, today, we are going to hear your thoughts and insights on emotional intelligence, which I'm so excited about. I'm going to totally geek out on that.
Me too.
And also the science of helping others. So they're kind of our 2 main topics of conversation. And Suzanne, what are you hoping the listener will take away from our conversation today?
I think that there's probably 2 big takeaways. One is that people feel like emotional intelligence is something they either have or they don't have, or it's just about being nice. But the truth is it is a muscle. And it helps you in every aspect of what you do. It'll help you in your relationships, in the workplace. And so the things we're going to be talking about today, you will be a better person in an hour as a result, because you're going to have fun, interesting ways to actually incorporate that in your life. And the next thing is an opportunity for you to get a boost through something that you maybe wouldn't expect. We're going to call it a helper's high for right now. And I'm going to share with you some things that you could incorporate into your 2026 routines that will allow you to kind of come out of it with maybe less doom scrolling and more hope scrolling. So turn maybe around your view of how the world is going by your just a couple of easy things that you can do.
I love that. And it sounds like both the topics that we're going to talk about are really going to be helpful to a lot of people. And you have spent most of your life helping others, but I imagine that started somewhere personal. So what moment or experience first sparked your desire to create change, and what was the change you were wanting to make?
Well, I always tell people that I come by kind of this change-making view very honestly. So both my parents were change makers, and we would actually get together at the dinner table every single night and talk about the world. And talk about what was happening in the world. But my parents would always talk to us about what was going on in our lives. And so some days I would have great days, and I'd get chosen for that part in the choir. As you know, we were both people who were vocal performance. But then there were some days where I didn't get picked, or something didn't happen. I didn't get the grade that I wanted on the test. And so I always like to channel my mom and my dad. So my mom would start with, well, what are you feeling? So I'm feeling happy, or I'm feeling disappointed, or I feel like something happened that, surprised me, or I'm sad because I didn't get picked for this particular thing. And then, of course, over time, I'd feel those feelings. And so I think it's important when something happens that you feel the feelings. But then my dad would shift into, and he was a football coach and also a principal. And he said, so what are you going to do differently tomorrow as a result? And so it's kind of like, I feel like in some ways I was, had a mom and a dad that was kind of a mix between Brene Brown as a mom and Ted Lasso as a dad. And so we would come to the dinner table with these problems, and we would try to solve them together as a family. And so I still do that to this day. I jokingly say to my clients, I'm half mechanic, half therapist. And part of what I think I learned at the dinner table is how important emotional intelligence is, and how important these things are, and how important it is to give back to your community. So those were just things that were part of my everyday when I was growing up. So
Wow.
I jokingly say to my students, I come to change making honestly. I grew up with it. I don't know any other way to be. And to me, it's not a job, it's a calling. I don't work a day in my life because I love what I do.
What a wonderful upbringing, and what intuitive parents you have, and almost new age and for that generation, because a lot of that generation didn't talk about their feelings. People didn't discuss their feelings. Feelings were swept under the table, and it was like stiff upper lip, just get up and get on with it. So that's incredible that they were like that. I'd love to get onto that topic of emotional intelligence. And it's a term that gets thrown around. We hear it more these days than what we ever have. And it's something that we rarely feel in action. So how do you, firstly, how do you define what emotional intelligence is? And is it a real thing?
It is a real thing. And, think about it in terms of IQ. And so IQ is relatively fixed. I'm also a big believer in multiple intelligences. So I believe there's people who have mechanical ability, there's analytical ability. I think everybody has an intelligence, and I would love to live in a society where we value all those intelligences equally. But we also have this thing called emotional intelligence, which is, how do you know your feelings? How do you then self-regulate? How do you then help other people? How do you understand the feelings of a room? And we're going to talk through that. And it's sometimes called emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. And honestly, the research is still relatively new on it, not like IQ, where it's been around for a while. And we're finding that in the age of AI, EI is more important than ever, because the robots can't ever get emotional intelligence. And that connection with other people, that is uniquely human. And so it's something where it's a muscle. You can build it over time, and you get better at it the more you practice it. And it can be something too that just the way in which you view it can also shift every other aspect of your life. And like I said, it's talked about mostly in the workplace, but I think it's equally important in your relationships. And also emotional intelligence in the community is something I spend a lot of time talking about and teaching in my class.
So what are the traits of an emotionally intelligent person? And what are some of the blind spots that prevent someone from becoming emotionally intelligent? Because I'm thinking here, when I was listening to you, there has to be a gender bias here. I mean, I was thinking about my husband and self-regulation, and I'm going, I think he's a 0 out of 10. But what are the traits of an emotionally intelligent person?
I think this is one of the big, ahas that we've had in the research, is that most people think of emotional intelligence and they think just about self-awareness. And it is a big portion of emotional intelligence and knowing yourself, and then kind of knowing enough about why things are happening. So it's also not just knowing the feeling, but knowing where the feeling is coming from. And so that's the first. And so think about it as a quadrant where you have the self and you have self-awareness. And then underneath self-awareness, how to manage that. So that's called self-regulation. And so those two kind of go hand in glove. And so the example I always give people is that we all have things that trigger us,
Oh, yes.
So the number one I hear from people is when you get cut off in traffic, most of us overreact at the other driver. And I will say I fell into that category 15 years ago. And now I've worked on myself enough over time where I have self-regulated. And I actually have, when that happens to me, I have over time, so 10 years ago, I started thinking about, well, what if that person is not a mean person? Maybe that person is getting their wife to the hospital on time. Or what if this person is new to the city and just doesn't know how crazy our traffic is? I don't want to be the person who honks at them when they're new in the city. Like, that's not a very welcoming thing. And so I've just realized that a lot of those things it's unintentional. And so self-regulation means I'm giving that person grace, but I'm also not letting it risk my adrenaline, where all of a sudden my adrenaline goes up. That means I'm going to be a more unsafe driver. I might actually cut other people off as a result, or not pay attention to my own driving. And so it causes harm to me potentially too. So self-regulation is something over time where now if someone cuts me off, I don't even really flinch. I'm just kind of like, okay, someone just cut me off, as if it just is, I'm unfazed by it. And so each of us have things that we're really triggered by. And so it's really important for us to kind of name and claim, and then figure out how do we just let that thing pass over us and not let us bother us as much as it would, particularly if it's something that, other people can't control and you can't control as well. So that's kind of the self-awareness and self-regulation.
Right.
Then we shift into the stuff related to social situations. So you go from self-awareness to social awareness. So these are the people who can read a room really easily. They walk into a room and they can just feel, is it high energy and are people happy or are people sad? And those are typically what we call empaths. And the reality is that's just something those people are more open to, but people can learn that behavior. They can actually, if they're really listening to people, they can actually get a sense of what someone's feeling, or they can ask people. So sometimes if you don't know, you can actually ask people and you can just get a sense of what the room is. And so sometimes that also is a really good cue for people who maybe don't have that same empath skill. And then underneath social awareness, you've got then the opportunity to do social influence. So how do you then manage the room? And this is what football coaches are great at. This is what good leaders are great at, where you almost figure out a way how to get the room to then move in the direction that you think it needs to through your vision, your strategy, and your communication skills. And that's what social influence is all about. That's executive presence, that's communication. And so in my class, I teach all 4 of those quadrants and give them tools and techniques that they can use. And usually they're good at one and less good at the other. And so it's really about practicing those and seeing how they play off of each other.
That's really interesting. To me, when you were describing all those 4 quadrants and putting it together, it sounds like emotional intelligence is almost a superpower, that if you can learn it, you can really manage not only your life, but influence other people. And I just know from my own life, there's been a big shift in the last couple of years where I was in a situation where my mum passed away and I had to go back to work within a couple of weeks of her passing. And I was not in a very good place. So I was doing a lot of work on myself before going to work, journaling, meditation, exercising, just doing everything I could to boost my mood, to kind of clear my feelings.
Yes.
And so when I stepped into that room, I wasn't being reactive because I had this baggage, this grief and this weight on my shoulders. I felt that I was walking into a room very unencumbered, I suppose is the word. And I felt that I was able to make space for others. But what I also found was that my intuition went through the Richter scale. All of a sudden, not only was I listening better, was I being far more present and mindful in that room with my students, but my intuition of how they were feeling, my radar really was peaking. And so when we talk about that we can learn EI, I'm going to call it EI. It's rather than AI, we've got EI here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How much of that doing the work on ourselves and not coming from a place of our own baggage is important to us becoming more emotional intelligent?
Well, I think to me, it is the foundational part of emotional intelligence, So I think to your point, we all have blind spots. And so one of the things I teach in my class on self-awareness is Johari's window. Are you familiar with it?
No.
So Johari's window is a term, and it may be an American kind of psychology, but I think a lot of other people use it, where there are things that are known to us and known to other people. Like it's really obvious to the other person, just like it's obvious that I'm a brunette.
Right.
It's obvious to people I smile a lot when you're around me. It's obvious to other people that you glow, from the inside out. Like these are things that you know about yourself and other people know about you. And then there's also things that you don't know, but everybody else knows about you. And those are your blind spots.
Right.
And if you have people around you who truly support you and care about you, they will uncover those blind spots for you. And they'll say, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but every time this particular situation happens, you do this thing. And it unintentionally gets in your way of being successful. And so we all have blind spots, and that's just part of, human existence. We live in our own bodies, and we sometimes don't fully appreciate how we're navigating the world. And so then we also have things that we hide from other people, that we know about ourselves and we hide from other people. And I think this is where women sometimes get into trouble, because this is where the imposter syndrome comes up. This is also where we show up in a room and we're not our full selves. And what happens in that space is humans have a lot of intuition at a subconscious level, and we come off as inauthentic in that place. And so that's not what we want. We want to be as authentic to that community as possible. And sometimes you have to be inauthentic. Like, if I'm not feeling really well and I have to go to my classroom, I will do everything possible, just like you, to drink as much water as possible, take as much vitamin C, and I'm going to power through that class.
Yes.
Because I need to. And that's okay. But I can't keep doing that 5 days in a row without unintentionally kicking into burnout. So a little bit of kind of keeping things from other people is okay, but too much of it is not okay, where you're not showing your true self. And then there's the fourth part of the window, which this is one of my favorites, which is the mystery. It's a mystery to you and it's a mystery to me. The example I always give my students is the 20-something Suzanne never would have thought she would have fallen in love with business and gotten an MBA. And here I thought I was a public policy person, social activist. I go get my MBA and I'm like, I love this. And this is where in life you should be a student forever. And there's always going to be things you're going to be surprised by that you don't realize you like. Just like I thought I hated Brussels sprouts, and now in the last 10 years, I'm like, I love Brussels sprouts. It's really just how they're prepared. And so these are the mysteries that, you want to uncover in life. And I would love to uncover those in your life all the time. And so I think what you've uncovered with what you have just talked about is that you are kind of on this higher order of emotional intelligence, where you're also realizing in certain situations, this is how you show up. So how do I, a couple days before, prepare myself so I can show up in the best possible way? And that's really what really great emotional intelligent people actually do. I was talking with a colleague today, and she's now having to travel a whole lot. And so she and I talked about some emotional intelligence things that she can do so that travel doesn't get to her, because she needs to be her best self when she goes and travels and meets with people. That's just the part of her life now that has changed. So I think that's what truly emotional intelligence people do, is they know themselves, they're learning themselves, and they also then know how do they move through the world and with much more flow and without having as much resistance to the world. And other people are not resistant to them as well. And so that's the beauty, is you just keep learning about yourself. And then I think, to your point, I think it's also about then how you are connecting with other people. And, what does that connection then look like as far as when you meet other people? How do you create that real tight connection with other people?
I do set intentions. I love everything that you just said, and it makes me feel very normal, because some people think I'm a lot. Like, for example, let's just talk about travel. You mentioned travel, and I'm traveling to LA next week, and that's a long haul flight. It's actually not the longest flight for us from Australia. It's 14 hours for me, which is, if we're going to Europe, that's 26 hours. If I'm going to Miami, Florida, it's at least 22 hours. So 14 hours. But I have my way of dealing with that. I don't eat the airplane food. So I make sure that I have a meal before I get on the plane, because the airplane food makes me feel awful. I have a seat by the window, because I figured out that I can get really comfortable and have the pillow on the window, lean on the window. But two, when I book my seat, I have figured out something really smart, that if I try and book a seat where there's no one in that same row. And a couple of days before the flight, I go in and check to see that there's still no one in that row. And then I will do it the night before the flight. And the number of times I've ended up with a row, the whole row to myself, which means 3 pillows, 3 blankets. I bring my own bottle of water, so I always have water on demand. You know, so yeah, so that is part of, so I'm not being a weirdo. That is part of what you're talking about, is figuring out what works for you.
Exactly. And, I think that I'll give you another example. So, when I travel internationally, I also assume that three things are going to go wrong. And I also assume my bag is going to get somehow or another waylaid. And here's the thing, like, if it does happen, then I have all the things I need for the next day, and I can still kind of maintain where I need to go and what I need to do. And then those three things, I just say, okay, when something bad happens, instead of being upset about it, I'm like, okay, here's thing number one, here's thing number two. And it almost becomes like a game for me. And so it's just how you think about it. It's how you kind of rationalize it. My husband is a pilot, and I've actually taught him some of these things. So I also, one of my other tips is to have treats for yourself while you're traveling that you only do when you actually travel. So you actually are looking forward to traveling. I also travel so much that I have a suitcase that is pre-packed. Everything is in there that I need. So I'm not anxious about forgetting anything, because my deodorant, my toothpaste, my contact solution, I have a separate set of glasses, everything is in there, and I don't have to worry about, did I miss anything? Because that's anxiety, and I don't need to give myself anxiety.
I do the same.
So it's just, you learn yourself, and you learn how you cope through things. And again, some people may be listening to this and going, that's crazy, Suzanne, like what? But again, that's my thing that I do. And I've learned that I am, I move through life smoother when I have those things taken care of. And so I just do these little things, and that's just self-awareness and self-regulation. I'll give you another fun example, because we skipped over the male versus female thing, which I think is so important, because I do think males have a tendency to think this isn't for me.
Oh, yes.
And so, and I'll use my husband as an example. I think what happens is it's a nature versus nurture situation. I just don't think men, as we currently have society and at a young level, are actually nurtured around feelings. And oftentimes, if they don't grow in an environment where it's okay to show their feelings, then they oftentimes realize they're going to repress those feelings.
Yes.
And I think also too, they don't necessarily, unless they have parents who, like you said, are evolved, feel comfortable in sharing their feelings, particularly negative feelings, so sadness, disappointment, those kind of things. And so one of the things I've done with my husband, and I actually learned this from him. So pilots, when they get into the cockpit, they're meeting the co-pilot for the first time. They've never met this person before yet. They're asked to fly a plane together.
Really?
So they have to get to know each other very quickly. And you need a co-pilot who has their A game going. Like, they need to be like ready to like fly that plane. But one of the first things they ask is, are you in the red, yellow, or green? So red means the night before I didn't sleep. I had an argument with my partner. I had food and my stomach is rumbling. Yellow means I'm kind of on the fence, like I didn't sleep very well. The other flights I had weren't great. And green means all systems go, like I'm doing great. So if my husband gets into the cockpit and he actually has a co-pilot, his first officer says they're in the yellow or the red, he's like, I'm flying this leg. Don't worry about it. Just, have my back. And the same thing for him. Like, every once in a while he gets a bug, or he, is coughing or something like that. And so we actually do that in our relationship. When we get home, we tell each other if we're in the red, yellow, or green. And if I come home and I'm in the red, guess who's in charge of dinner? He is. If we're both in the yellow, then, we basically do DoorDash.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. And it just telegraphs to him how I'm feeling without me saying, I'm not feeling well, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. It's just shorthand.
Wow.
And so that level of shorthand between partners can be so helpful.
That is incredible. My husband comes from a background where they were shamed for having feelings. He comes from a family of 3 boys. He was a middle child. His father would use a strap on them. So there was a lot of physical punishment. There was a lot of emotional punishment and shaming. And he would basically be told that if he was upset about something, his father would say, "What are you? Are you a girl? I'm going to put a skirt on you." So he struggled with his feelings, and he's sometimes ashamed to share his feelings. And he is getting better with that. He is getting better. And not only I feel are there a lot of men that feel that way, but I think there's a whole generation that have been brought up that way. And is it too late for that generation?
I don't think so. And that's why I like green, yellow, red, because you don't have to name the feeling. You just have to say which color you are. And for whatever reason, that color is not hard for them to name. And then, I'll say to my husband, if he's in the red, well, do you want to talk about it? And my go-to, and I learned this from a good friend of mine, is when someone is in the red, or I can tell they're in the red. So I'm an empath, so I can usually tell when someone's in the red, or definitely in the yellow. I say, which H do you want? Do you want me to hold space? Do you want a hug? Or do you want help?
Love that.
And giving them a choice of like how I'm going to show up for them. So at one, it telegraphs I've heard them, but it also telegraphs to them like what they need. And so I'll do the same thing with him if he's in the red. And I'm like, do you want to talk about it? And he'll be like, no, but probably later. I'm like, okay, great. You let me know when you want to talk about it. Do you just want a hug? Do you want to just hold space? Because sometimes he just wants proximity, And so I think it's just helpful. He's the same way. Like he comes home from a flight and I need to give him about 10 minutes of space before we talk, because he needs to kind of get in the zone and get unpacked and get kind of reacclimated. And so I think partners knowing each other's routines and not giving the other person grace and giving people kind of the ability to kind of be who they are, I think is also really important, because I'm a big believer you can't change people.
Really?
They've got to want that level of change.
Oh,
And they've got to want it for themselves, not for the other person.
100%. I 100% agree with you. So you've talked about when people are in some sort of funky mood and using that red, yellow, or green scale. Does that work if you're in a high stress meeting, or if you're in a conflict situation? What do you do in those situations?
I'm glad you brought that up, because we talked about it in personal relationships, but this equally affects the workplace. And so I've worked with a number of companies who are managers, and, I do this sometimes too with people who I'm working with. I'll ask them, where are you on a scale of 1 to 5? Sometimes I'll even ask people at the beginning of a meeting, tell me what emotion you're bringing into this.
Oh,
And, people will talk about it. And usually I'll do emotion, and then I'll say, tell me the animal that connects with, so I'm curious like an owl, or or I'm nervous because, I'm waiting on someone to call me back, and so that way people can then tell kind of what's going on. And so that way, if they do get a phone call from a meeting, I'm not like, why are they leaving this meeting? I'm like, oh, they were waiting on that phone call. Go take that call. And so I think we just need to be okay with people being, who they are. And everybody is coming into a meeting from a previous meeting, with a text message or a person they're waiting on a medical, situation. And I just think we need to let them name and claim it. And then that way we're not wondering. I think sometimes we try to read other people's minds, and we don't always interpret other people correctly. And so just having the opportunity for people to say, this is kind of how I'm showing up today, I think is really healthy, and it allows you to connect with them. So if I have a direct report or someone that comes in and they tell me they're in the yellow or the red, I don't instantly go to, here's the to-do list that we need to talk through. I say, well, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to vent a little bit? Is there a way I could help and support you? Do you need a hug? Because they're not going to be in a place where they can actually get to action on my to-do list anyway, if they're in the red. So it just helps people kind of interact in a way that I think is just much more seamless and much more respectful of where they are in that moment. And as a manager, I think that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to connect with them with where they are in that moment, and then trying to partner with them on whatever is that thing that they need to get over, whatever hump they're in, how do you get over that together? So I do think that it is possible. And I worked with all different leaders at all different scales. And they all love the fact that, they just get to be who they are. In fact, I even have a mood meter for some managers where, they can say, this is the mood I'm in, and it's yellow, red, and green, so, and then they're getting better about saying, oh, I have anxiety right now, or I just was embarrassed and this is what happened. Because honestly, we don't really understand some of our emotions very well. We can't really name them very well and know how long it takes for us to move away from that hot state of that emotion. Like when we're embarrassed, that hot state happens for a while. And so it's hard for us to then flip into a positive emotion associated with it. So I just think it's so important. And again, naming that feeling and just it being there and being, connected with someone else, that's just part of the human condition.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I am loving this. There are so many great takeaways here. And I feel that I can actually implement some of these tools in my teaching studio. And I think one of the most important things is that what you're doing is holding space for people and meeting them where they're at in that moment in time.
That's right.
And I teach that same way. We call that student-centered learning, where it's not teacher-centered. It's about the person who's in front of you and what their needs are in that particular moment in time on that day. And I know that if my students are highly anxious or they're stressed about an exam that they're going to go and do after my class, or that they're behind in an assignment, I'm not going to get anything out of them in that lesson. So I have to have a practice where I regulate their nervous system, and I just do that with a breathing exercise that I have. I put them on the ground and have them do a breathing exercise.
Absolutely.
But it's exactly the same thing. So what we're actually, I feel, in essence doing is allowing people to show up authentically and share that this is who I am today and this is how I'm feeling today in this moment. And we're going, it's okay. We accept you and we love you and care about you just as you are. Is kind of what I'm getting.
Well, and let's shift to how you can then change the room. So if you're aware that people are like that, then you realize the superpower of when you get a group of people in the room, how do you move the room? And so some of that is what you just did with the breathing exercise, because I do feel like the nervousness spreads among the room. Like if one person's nervous, other people get nervous. It's similar to laughing. Laughing is contagious. I think emotions are contagious as well. And then, part of the way I do that is through play. I think adults should play in the workplace. And I've gotten really great success in giving them exercises together or getting them to connect with each other or talk to each other, and using play as an opportunity for them to learn together. And design thinking, we use that in business schools all the time. Getting people to play and design together. And so that allows social cohesion, that allows teamwork, that allows you to come together. It allows you to learn from each other. And so to me, I also think play is a good part of what you're talking about. So whether it's a breathing exercise and helping people center or helping people play together so that you naturally build in teamwork, I think those are great ways to bring groups together so they have a common emotion with each other.
Can you give me an example of something that you may use, a tool in when you're playing together?
So this is a simple one, just a simple icebreaker to start a meeting. Changes the dynamic of the room because everybody is coming in with an expectation of what's going on. And you'd be shocked at me just starting a meeting, the first 5 minutes and me saying, tell me what your 2006 resolution is, or tell me something you're looking forward to this weekend, or tell me your favorite ice cream. It just gets people connected and they're starting to have fun together. And then we'll kind of shift to the meeting and saying, let's set some ground rules for each other, particularly if it's a group of people who've never met each other before. And so you personalized it so they've gotten to know each other. You now have kind of created a sense of play in the room because they're laughing together, they're talking together. And then you shift into like, here's what the meeting is about. Let's create some rules together, rules of engagement. So that's some of the ways we do it. I also think trying to do some design thinking exercises can also be helpful. So one of my favorite is a vision board. So if I'm doing a strategic planning exercise, I will tell the board to pull out, markers and crayons and a piece of paper and say, okay, I want you to come up with, in 3 years, what do you want the headline to be about this organization? And I want you to come up with a headline for the newspaper article. I want you to tell me what newspaper or what publication this is in. I want you to draw a picture and then tell me the 3 bullet points. And that level of creative energy, they get excited, they talk to each other, they kind of, as I oftentimes will say, innovation happens through collision. So they're colliding with each other. You can just feel the energy of the room, like getting creative and thinking out of the box together.
That's amazing.
So that's what I mean by play. And you'd be surprised, just giving an adult a marker and colors is just like, they're like, this is so great. I even do, when I do workshops, I do toys, so I give them toys that they can play with and they can manipulate. And that also helps their brain behavior too. And immediately that's the first thing. It doesn't matter if it's a Fortune 500 CEO, they'll be like, ooh, you brought toys. Like, yes, I did bring toys. And then they talk about the toys and who wants what toys, and they trade with each other. And it's just like kindergarten all over again. So those are just some small, cheap examples of things you can do to bring play. And again, it goes to social awareness. How do you get a group to start coming together and then wanting to work on the more serious stuff? When you get to the serious stuff, it becomes easier because they've already played together. They already trust each other.
Amazing, amazing. Suzanne, as I said, I love everything that you're talking about, and you're giving us some amazing tips. There are so many things that I'm learning and things that I want to implement myself that are really simple. I think it doesn't take rocket science to do some of these things that you're suggesting.
No.
I would like to transition to talking about the helper's high and the science of giving and feeling. So I love this concept about the helper's high. And for those who are new to it, can you explain what is actually happening in the brain and the body when we help someone else? What is the science telling us about the benefits of this?
Well, and this is a little bit going back to emotional intelligence too. So basically, when we're connecting with someone else and we're actually helping somebody else, we get what's called the helper's high. And so it reduces depression. It also increases happiness. And I want you to kind of think about the last time you helped somebody. And there's something about knowing that you're part of a larger community. And that you're doing something altruistically just for that other person. And so for me, it can come down to a lot of different tools and techniques. So we have a 4 T's framework. And so you can give in time, talent, treasure, and testimony. And so certainly time is really something you can give other people. And what most people think of is they need lots of time in order to do it. And so I always try to kind of help people think through their time. So for example, even just taking time to smile at other people when you walk past them doesn't take any extra time, but has a huge impact on other people. Just returning your grocery cart, just little things of time, walking past people on a sidewalk. I grew up in a rural community, and waving at people when you drive past them, that doesn't take a lot of time, but it builds community.
Yes.
It makes people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. So time doesn't have to be a large amount of time. It also doesn't have to be solo time. So I recommend one of my favorite dates that I do with my husband is we go volunteer together. And so we'll do Meals on Wheels together, or we'll go volunteer together and go do something together. When we go on walks, we'll oftentimes pick up trash along the way, and we actually will joke with each other of who finds the craziest thing by the end of our walk. kind of like a prize or gamification. That doesn't take extra time, but look at what we're doing to kind of help the environment. So it doesn't have to be extra time. I also recommend with families, you can volunteer together and you can make it a game as well. So it doesn't have to be this extravagant thing. And oftentimes people think volunteerism has to be complicated or with a nonprofit. It doesn't always have to be that way. So talent. So talent could be a lot of different things. So you could be great at building websites and you could donate your time to a nonprofit. I love baking, but it's just my husband and I, and that's one of my talents. So I always make twice as much, and then we give it to the next door neighbor who's an elderly couple, and they love our food because they don't get homemade food very often.
Oh.
And so we just, every holiday, we make extra and we take it over to them, and it's so meaningful to them. Like, they love it. So that's talent. And so there's lots of things you can do. I have a nephew who his talent is raking leaves and different things. And so he goes around to different neighbors. And when he's raking the leaves of his house, he actually rakes the leaves of some other people's houses. And he feels good at the end of it. And plus it's good energy. It's good activity for him. So time, talent, of course, treasure. If you have money to donate, donate to a local nonprofit. It doesn't have to be a lot. You can just forgo a Starbucks once a week and set it and forget it, and just give $5 to a nonprofit every single week, something that's meaningful to you, and just forgo something that's a luxury item for you. And then over time, as you have more treasure, you can give. You can also encourage other people to give. So there's giving days across the country where you can actually give, and you can encourage your friends to give. And the last is testimony. So this is a new one for a lot of people, but our voices matter so much. And it comes down to voting and making sure you're voting. That's using your voice. That's using your testimony. It's also going on social media and talking about a cause that matters to you. So it could be the importance of recycling. It could be the importance of art. It could be maybe there's a great Shakespeare coming up, and you tell everybody, hey, there's this really great Macbeth that's coming up. You guys should go see live audiences. It is be in the room when it happens. Don't just kind of sit at home on Netflix, but go actually see Macbeth. That testimony really matters to people, because that's how they kind of make decisions about what they're doing and what's going on in the world. And so all those things don't take a lot of time and effort, but you get that helper's high because you realize, you're contributing to society, and you're doing what I call everyday change making, making a difference in the lives of yourself, other people, and the larger community. And I think all of those things are things I want to see more of as we kind of go into this century even further.
Some of those things are only small acts, yet they're so meaningful. And they're things I would never have ever thought of. I think we always think that everything we do needs to be grand. If we're doing good, it needs to be a grand gesture. I had something happen to me. I love random acts of kindness from other people and doing those.
Me too.
Yes. And over the last few weeks, I've been the recipient of some amazing acts of kindness. There was a gentleman at my local cafe who was in a wheelchair. He was very disabled, and I felt that the server couldn't see him because he was behind the cabinet where all the cakes and the pastries were. So I said, look, you're next. I'll make sure that you get served. And as it was getting to his turn, I once again turned to him. I said, it's your turn. You go up, and he asked me my name and asked me, so what coffee do you enjoy from here? And I'm thinking, I think he wants to buy me a coffee. I said, no, you don't need to. It's okay. I know what you're wanting to do here. You don't need to buy me a coffee. And they knew me at the cafe, and they know what I drink. And he quietly went about organizing it with the staff. And the next thing, I had a free coffee from this gentleman. And honestly, even now it makes me want to tear up.
Oh.
It was so kind. And you don't realize until you are the recipient at times.
I know.
how meaningful those small acts are. Just incredible. And also the server wanted to cry.
And just to be seen and appreciated,
Mm.
it's so important. And I think we are forgetting that. And I mean, again, we talked about doom scrolling earlier. Like, I think there is so much that is heavy going on right now. And I think that is contributing to our mindset. And I think we've got to shift that narrative around, we are in control of how much we let that in, and how much we perpetuate it, or how much we go the other direction and say, you know what, I want to be about creating that level of feeling. I'll give you another one that I love that I do every Friday morning. So Friday is one of those days that by the end of the week, I am tired. Like, I feel like I'm ready for the day to or the week to kind of end. So I did something that, one, is about self-regulation for me, but it also is about other people, where I choose 5 people who made the biggest difference to me. And I just look at my calendar, and I text them first thing Friday and just say, thank you so much for. And it could be a teacher that I had where, I regurgitated something that they taught me 20 years ago. It could be someone that, like you said, someone that has served me at a restaurant, and I'll send the manager a note saying this person was amazing. It doesn't really matter. It's different people. It could be my husband. It's different people at different times. And I just choose the 5 people who've impacted me the most Monday through Thursday. And honestly, I'm like floating the rest of Friday, because not only did I feel better because I sent it, but they are like, oh my gosh, Suzanne, thank you so much for texting me. Or the manager's like, you have no idea how many people email me because they're upset about things, but I very rarely get nice emails about people who have gotten good service. So thank you for sending this. She or he is really a great server. And so I just kind of float the rest of Friday as a result, and it kind of takes me to the weekend. And I would never not do it now, because it is so much a part of like who I am now on Fridays.
That's incredible. You seem like an amazing human being. Wow. I just want half of what you have.
I've just learned what works for me. I learned the life hacks that work for me.
Yes, and that's important. It's being self-aware helps you self-regulate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it just reminds me, all the things that you were describing, that we feel that as a single human being, like that one, as a one person in this global, like all these people across the whole world, that we can't make a difference. But actually, if everyone, each single human being did one kind thing, it would be a total game changer. So we do have the power to create change for the good in the world.
Well, do that good thing. Give that person a moment of grace. Repay kindness, even if you don't feel like you've gotten the right treatment. It's taking that higher ground. And I think that's the thing we've got to teach people, is that it's not about the other person. It's about the person you want to be. And that higher, like you were talking about, that higher order of just emotional regulation and staying in flow, and not letting things outside of your control change who you are on the inside, or change how you're floating through things. And so I think it's so important, and knowing where your blind spots and triggers are, and not letting those things, throw you curveballs. So yes, absolutely, all those things, and just find the things that work for you.
Yes. And I think too that, you talked about refilling your cup, and how on a Friday, that is your method of refilling your cup. Do you have other self-care practices that help you emotionally regulate and also dig deeper into this helper's high?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple of things. Number one, I am a big believer not in time management, but energy management. So I really pay attention to what time of day is my best time of day. So I generally do not schedule anything between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. because that's like my brain is on fire during that time, and I do all my writing, all the things that I need to do that have the most strategic skill set then. And I hold those kind of, that is the time that no one else can get, with the exception of my husband. And so that time is precious to me. And then I also, I believe in energy of other people. And so I believe you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so you spend time with people who energetically reflect you and make you a better person. And so that means sometimes there are people who are not as good for you for whatever reason. It's not because they're not a great person, but because they're just not connected to you. And so I pay attention to that and not let people kind of shift me and shift my energy. So it means I have to choose people wisely who I spend time with. I think that is probably my biggest learning over the last 10 years is that energy management.
Yes.
The other thing I spend a lot of time with is really finding the people who are my people, and not trying so hard to be liked. Because I do think that I spent a lot of my time, I'm a middle child as well. You're mentioning your husband. And I think I spent a lot of time wanting other people to like me versus just being who I was authentically. And if I wasn't someone's cup of tea, that's just how it is. Like I'm the person that I am. And, there's a Margaret Thatcher quote that I remind my students, and it kind of reminds me too, is, would you rather be liked or respected? Like you can't have both. And honestly, respect is more important to me.
Absolutely.
And so I have really spent a whole lot of time finding my people. And so I'd say the other thing is I just know who my people are. Like I know who are the people who are my ride or dies. And those are the people who I go to and I'll call if I'm having a breakdown. I'll call if I'm having a breakthrough. Like I know who those people are. And I just protect those people like they're gems, like they're diamonds. And I continue to remind them and thank them and appreciate them too. So I think that's also important. They're on my gratitude list many times.
I feel like our worlds have totally aligned. Everything that you were just talking about there in terms of energy, I don't think people realize that we're all energetic beings. And that energy is something that we need to preserve and take care of and try and be at that highest level of energy as possible. And that people around you can suck your energy dry, and just being aware of that. And I actually feel that in my body. If someone is draining my energy, I feel it throughout my whole body, and I almost go into that fight, flight, or freeze where I feel that I need to get away from this person. It's like, danger, danger. Get away from this human.
Yes, same here.
They are not good for you. They're going to deplete you. And
yeah,
that's only something that I've learned in a very short time, like very recently. And if you could go back to your younger self and give that younger self a piece of advice around emotional intelligence, what would that be?
Such a great question. And I'm on a journey too of emotional intelligence as well. And you know this because you're a teacher as well. Part of the reason why I teach it is because it ingrains it into me. Like I learn it through my students. They tell me things. I get better at it as I go through. So I do feel like part of the reason why I teach it is because I want to consistently have it be a theme for me. I think the thing that I have very recently picked up on is this liking thing. I think I really felt like success was about being liked.
Or popular.
Yeah, or popular. I think I felt that was important. Yeah, and I think that I would say to the 16-year-old Suzanne that, you are you. And I have always been someone who shines a lot, and I'm just who the person I am is. And I have just this energy, and it is not for everybody. And it doesn't matter for what reason it's not for everybody. I just need to go to the people who it is for them, and that
exactly
I'm the perfect match for them. And I'm not too much. I'm not too little, and I think I tried to kind of be a people pleaser very early and kind of shapeshift, based on the circumstances. So I was definitely that person who kind of wasn't always showing up authentically. I was being whatever I thought the other person wanted me to be so that they would like me and I would get And I just think it ended up dulling me out versus letting me just be who I was. And so I've learned that, I think, in the last, 5 to 7 years. My husband, I think, has really helped me with that. I've gotten a level of quiet confidence that that's just how it is. And if someone doesn't return my phone call, it's just not meant to be. I don't take it personally.
Yes.
And I am excited about the people who do return the phone calls and the people who I do energetically connect with. Now, that's not to say that I don't pay attention when something happens, that I might have a blind spot, that I might have made a mistake in interaction with someone, and I don't take that criticism and think about it and try to figure out how do I then do it differently, whether it's in a keynote or anything like that. So just so you know, I'm very conscious too of my blind spots. And so I think it's both and. Like, how do I find that perfect place where I just am authentically who I am, but if I'm doing something that unintentionally hurts another person, I can shift and I can change so that way we go together a bit better and they better understand who I am. And they get me a little bit better. So I do a little bit of both still.
That's the beauty of maturing. I won't say of aging because that's not the word I want to use, but I think it's just that as we get older, we understand the importance of recognizing who we are, and we are good enough. We are enough, but also at the same time trying to step into the best version of ourselves and constantly evolving to strive to become better and better, not because we are not enough, but because of quality of life and because of being in service and doing good and being the best person we can be. So, Suzanne, we're going to start wrapping this up. I've loved the time I've spent with you. This has been so insightful, and I've learnt a tremendous amount from you. All those little tools and actions, they're all really doable. And I think our listeners are going to get a lot of value from this conversation.
I'm so pleased.
And one of the questions I ask all my guests, but you've already answered this, is do you care what others think of you? So we don't need to cover that one. You gave a beautiful answer to all of that. And one of the reasons I ask that question is because a lot of creatives and a lot of people who listen to this podcast and really struggle with taking the first step forward in their careers or shifting gears or transitioning in their lives because they worry so much about what other people are going to think of them if they fail.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to ask you is, through your journey, you're a woman in leadership, you're discussing and teaching something that a lot of people may not be aware of, or something that is a new phenomena for them, that emotional intelligence, that helpers high. Have you ever felt unheard or silenced or shut down at any time in that journey?
One of the things I'll just mention is a lot of this stuff is on my website. So if anything has resonated with somebody, they can always go to the website and learn a bit more. Because I do think that emotional intelligence is hard to unpack in a short period of time. And so we've got trainings, we've got tools, all of them free of charge. I mean, so there's so much more to unpack on emotional intelligence. But I think the thing that I oftentimes find is that the people who I struggle with the most are actually the most intelligent. So I'm going to circle back to the first thing that we talked about, which is the higher the IQ, the less cognitively flexible people typically are. And so that's why you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because oftentimes the smartest person in the room has always leaned into that level of intelligence, not realizing both intelligences really matter. And so what we learned in the research, and so I teach entrepreneurs, is that you want to be as cognitively flexible as possible, which basically means you're always open to the possibilities. You're always open to any person that comes in front of you. And so my grandmother used to say that you're a patchwork quilt of every other person you've ever met.
Love that.
But you've got to be open to that patch.
Mm.
And you've got to be open that everybody in this world is here to teach you. And it doesn't matter who you are, how smart you are. And actually, the people who are the most brilliant, so Einstein and Edison and all the people who we talk about as being the most intelligent, are the people who are the most receptive to other people and their ability to impact them. They also are the people who are not in their own little box. So they were inspired by art, even though they were scientists. They were inspired by all sorts of different things and inspired by every aspect of the universe. And so I think the thing I would say is that the people who most resist me are typically the smartest people, because they've gotten to where they are because they're smart. But I always remind them there's a limit to your growth. Because at this point, you're an expert in your field, but now you've got to lead other people. And that is all about emotional intelligence. They're going to only follow you if the idea is good, yes, but because they believe in you, and they will now follow you. And I have a cool little video that I use in my emotional intelligence thing about the importance of leadership versus followership and why people follow people, that breaks that down for them, where they're finally like, oh, I finally get it. And so I think that's the big one. The more intelligent you are, the more resistant you are. That emotional intelligence is going to make you is your next leap. It's going to take you to that next level.
Okay, so people start investing in EI rather than AI.
Yes, the robots can never learn EI.
No, they are very emotionally dumb. Okay.
Exactly right.
Suzanne, we're going to share the links to you, to your website, to all the information, the video that you were talking about. I truly appreciate you. I think this has been one of the most wonderful conversations I've had on the podcast. I love the tools. You've really inspired me to want to do better. And I hope that the listeners too, it has inspired them. I'm sure it has. And I wish you all the very best in the future. And I hope that we can reconnect sometime again and let's learn more about EI.
Absolutely. Well, the truth is, it's just choosing to make a different choice. So as we go back to my parents, my dad would say, the only person you're competing with in life is the person you were yesterday. And so choose differently tomorrow. Pick one of the things we've talked about today and choose to bring it into your life. And I promise you, you'll get that helper's high. You'll get that kind of ingenuity from emotional intelligence, and you'll keep going and choose something different and just keep getting better and better.
Thank you. Beautiful parting advice there, Suzanne. You go and enjoy the rest of your evening, and I truly appreciate you and look forward to reconnecting with you again soon.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for what you bring into this space too. Your energy is just something we all need right now. And so thank you for letting me join you.
Thank you. Okay. See you, Suzanne.